The cold wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a physical weight, a heavy, jagged shroud of ice pressing against my lungs. Every breath I took felt like swallowing broken glass. My name is Jessica, and I was born into the Iron Ridge Pack as a ghost. In a world of predators, I was the girl who couldn't bite back. I was the Omega healer, the one they called upon to stitch their wounds and scrub their floors, but never the one they looked at with respect. To Beta Silas, I was less than the dirt beneath his boots. If you step outside those gates, Jessica, don't bother coming back, Silas had sneered only an hour ago, his eyes like flint. The blizzard is coming. We don't waste search parties on Omegas who go looking for trouble. But I had heard it. A cry so primal, so filled with agony, that it had sliced through the howling wind and pierced my very soul. A wolf was dying out there. And in our territory, mercy was a crime punishable by exile. I pushed through the knee-deep snow, my thin cloak offering no protection. My fingers were blue, stiff and unresponsive as I reached the clearing near the Blackwood Pass. There he was. He was massive, larger than any wolf I had ever seen. His fur, a coat of midnight black, was matted with frozen blood. His back leg was caught in a sliver trap, a cruel, silver-laced device designed to kill shifters slowly. The silver was poisoning him, burning through his flesh, sending veins of black necrosis up his thigh. "It's okay," I whispered, though my voice was a raspy ghost of its former self. The wolf growled, a sound that shook the very ground, but his amber eyes were clouded with pain. He tried to lunge, to protect himself even in death, but he collapsed, his head hitting the crimson-stained snow. I knelt beside him. I knew the law. To touch an unknown wolf was treason. To use my healing gift on a stranger was a death sentence. But as I looked into his fading eyes, I didn't see a stranger. I saw life. I reached for the trap. The silver burned my skin instantly. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the storm. But I didn't let go. I felt my own life force, that spark of golden light I used to heal the pack's warriors, begin to drain. It flowed out of my fingertips and into the dying beast. I was giving him everything. My warmth, my blood, my very last breath. The trap snapped open with a metallic shriek. The wolf was free. I slumped forward, my forehead resting against his fur. The world was turning gray. The white snow felt like a warm bed now. I was so tired. "Run." I gasped, the word barely a puff of steam in the air. "Go, before they find you." I felt a sudden, massive heat. A presence so powerful it made the blizzard seem like a summer breeze. The wolf wasn't running. Through the haze of my failing vision, I saw the black fur recede, replaced by the tanned, scarred skin of a man. A king. He gathered my broken, freezing body into his arms. His touch was like fire. "You gave your life for a monster, little healer," a voice rumbled, thick with a power that demanded the world stop spinning. "Now, I will burn the world down to keep you in it." As my eyes closed, the last thing I felt was the Alpha King's heartbeat against my ear, and the terrifying realization that by saving him, I had started a war I wouldn't live to see. Before we move on with the rest of the story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? How is the weather over there? Is it as snowy as Jessica's mountain, or are you enjoying some sun? If you're enjoying the story so far, please make sure to like and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter of Jessica's journey. Your support helps this story reach more people. The transition from the freezing darkness to the blinding light of consciousness was a slow, agonizing crawl. For a long time, there was only the smell of cedar wood and expensive leather, scents that didn't belong in the damp, moldy Omega quarters of the Iron Ridge Pack. I tried to move my hand, but it felt like it was made of lead. "Don't," a voice commanded. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of an earthquake. I forced my eyelids open. I wasn't in the snow. I wasn't in my small, cramped room back home. I was lying in a bed so large it felt like a field, covered in furs that were softer than anything I had ever touched. The room was vast, built of dark stone and heavy timber. A massive fireplace roared in the corner, casting dancing orange shadows against the walls. And sitting in a high-backed chair by the fire was the man from the clearing. He was terrifying. Even sitting down, he looked like he could snap a tree trunk with his bare hands. His hair was black as a raven's wing, and his jawline was sharp enough to cut. But it was his eyes, those burning, molten amber eyes, that pinned me to the mattress. Where am I? My voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. You are in the Black Peak Fortress, he said, standing up. He moved with a predatory grace that made my heart hammer against my ribs. You are in the heart of the North. My blood ran cold. The North. This was the territory of the Alpha King, Charlie Vane. The stories said he was a butcher. They said he had killed his own father to take the throne, and that he showed no mercy to those who crossed his borders. I saved you, I whispered, the memory of the silver trap flashing through my mind. You were the wolf. Charlie stopped at the edge of the bed. He looked down at my hands. They were wrapped in clean, white linen, but I could still feel the phantom burn of the silver. You are an Omega of the Iron Ridge, he stated, his voice dropping an octave. Your pack laws are clear. You should have left me to rot. Why didn't you? I looked away, unable to meet his intense gaze. I'm a healer. It doesn't matter who is hurting. I couldn't just watch you die. Charlie let out a dark, cynical, soft laugh. In this world, Jessica, it matters very much who is hurting. Your beta, a man named Silas, arrived at my gates an hour ago. He came to demand your return. He said you stole pack supplies and fled into the night. I bolted upright, despite the flare of pain in my chest. I didn't steal anything. I only took my own medicine bag. I know, Charlie said, his eyes darkening. And I told him that if he stepped foot on my land again, I would send his head back to his alpha in a box. My breath hitched. You defied a beta for me? I'm just an Omega. I'm nothing to them. I'm nothing to anyone. Charlie leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off his skin. He reached out, his large, callous thumb grazing my jawline. It was a touch that should have been frightening, but instead, it sent a strange shiver through my body, one that wasn't caused by the cold. You are the woman who reached into a silver trap to save a king, he murmured. To them, you might be nothing. But to me, you are the only person in this godforsaken mountain range who isn't a coward. The door to the chambers creaked open, and a tall, stern-looking woman entered. She wore a gray dress and carried a tray of broth. This was Mrs. Gable, the head of Charlie's household. She didn't look at me with the disgust I was used to back home. She looked at me with something that felt dangerously like pity. She needs to eat, sire, Mrs. Gable said softly. The silver fever hasn't fully broken yet. Charlie nodded, but he didn't take his eyes off me. Eat. Get your strength back. You're going to need it. Why? I asked, fear creeping back into my throat. Are you going to send me back? Charlie's expression turned to stone. No one is taking you anywhere. But Silas isn't the type to let a thief go. He's already rallying your pack. He claims I've kidnapped you. He's using you as an excuse to start a border war he's wanted for years. I sank back into the pillows, the weight of his words crushing me. I had tried to do one good thing in my life, one act of true kindness, and now it was going to cause a massacre. I'm sorry, I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. I should have just stayed in the camp. I should have let you die. Charlie's hand gripped the bedpost, so hard the wood groaned. Don't you ever say that. You gave your last breath for me, Jessica. I intend to make sure you get 1,000 more in return, even if I have to kill every wolf in Iron Ridge to ensure it. He turned and strode out of the room, his heavy boots echoing against the stone floor. As the door clicked shut, I looked down at my bandaged hands. I was a healer who had saved a killer. I was an Omega caught between two alphas. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a ghost. I was the spark that was about to set the entire United States shifter territory on fire. I picked up the spoon with trembling fingers, the warmth of the broth a stark reminder that I was still alive. But as the wind howled against the fortress walls, I knew the real storm was only just beginning. The days in the Black Peak Fortress passed in a blur of fever and firelight. While the world outside was locked in a lethal winter, the interior of the king's stronghold was a place of strange, silent luxury. I was no longer scrubbing floors until my knuckles bled or sleeping on a thin cot in a drafty barn. Here, I slept on silk. I ate venison and honey, but the comfort felt like a lie. Every time I looked at the heavy oak door of my room, I remembered that I was a fugitive. By the fourth day, the silver fever had finally receded, leaving me weak but upright. I couldn't stay in that bed any longer. I needed to move. I needed to know what was happening beyond these stone walls. I slipped out of the room, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. The fortress was a labyrinth of shadows and history. Everywhere I turned, there were tapestries of great battles and statues of ancient alphas. I felt like an ant wandering through a temple of giants. You shouldn't be out of bed. I jumped, spinning around to find a man standing in the archway of the library. He wasn't Charlie. He was younger, with light brown hair and a kind, weary face. This was Caleb, Charlie's lead enforcer and closest friend. I needed air. I stammered, pulling my shawl tighter around my shoulders. Caleb walked toward me, his hands tucked into his pockets. He didn't radiate the same crushing power as the king, but there was a steady strength to him. The king is in the war room. Things are tense. Because of me, I said, my heart sinking. Caleb didn't lie to me. He didn't offer the easy comfort I expected. Silas has moved his men to the Frozen Creek border. He's telling the other packs that Charlie is holding an innocent Omega hostage for dark rituals. He's trying to turn the council against us. Innocent. I let out a bitter laugh. Silas spent 5 years calling me a curse. He used to tell the pups that if they touched me, they'd lose their shift. Now he's my champion? Caleb's eyes softened. Charlie knows. He's seen the scars on your back, Jessica. When he brought you in, he was shaking. I've known that man since we were cubs, and I've never seen his hands shake. I felt a heat crawl up my neck that had nothing to do with the fever. Why would a king care about the scars of a broken healer? Can I see him? I asked softly. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. Follow me. But be warned, he's not in a good mood. He led me deep into the heart of the fortress, to a room where the air smelled of old parchment and cold iron. As the doors opened, I saw Charlie standing over a massive map spread across a wooden table. He was shirtless, despite the chill, and the sight of his back took my breath away. He was covered in scars, some from claws, some from silver, and one massive, jagged mark that ran from his shoulder to his waist. It was the mark of a survivor. I told you to stay in the West Wing. Charlie growled without turning around. He knew it was me just by my scent. I'm not a prisoner, Charlie, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I'm not a child. If there's going to be a war over my head, I want to know why. Charlie turned slowly. His face was a mask of exhaustion and fury. Silas is demanding a trial of reclamation. He wants to challenge me for your life. If I refuse, the council will label me a rogue king. They'll authorize a multi-pack invasion. Then give me back, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. If I go back, the war stops. You won't have to lose your men to an Omega who can't even shift. In a flash, Charlie was across the room. He didn't grab me, but he slammed his hands onto the table behind me, pinning me between his arms. The scent of him, pine needles and thunderstorms, wrapped around me like a physical thing. You think this is just about pack law? He hissed, his amber eyes glowing with an inner fire. I was dying in that snow, Jessica. I had accepted it. I was waiting for the dark to take me. And then you appeared. You, a tiny thing who could barely carry her own weight, chose to burn your own soul to keep mine flickering. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. I am the Alpha King. I have everything. I have land, I have gold, I have an army. But in 28 years, no one has ever given me anything without expecting a crown in return. Except you. I just didn't want you to be alone. I breathed. Exactly, he whispered. And now, you will never be alone again. I am not fighting for an Omega. I am fighting for the woman who saved the man behind the monster. For a moment, the world stopped. The map, the war, the howling wind, it all vanished. There was only the heat of his body and the terrifying, beautiful realization that this man didn't just want to protect me. He wanted to claim me. But the moment was shattered by a frantic knocking at the door. A scout burst in, his face pale and flecked with ice. Sire, the Iron Ridge has crossed the creek. They aren't waiting for the council. They've brought the hounds of Silas. They're burning the border villages to draw us out. Charlie's face transformed. The tenderness I had glimpsed vanished, replaced by a cold, murderous resolve. He reached for a heavy black tunic and pulled it over his head. Caleb, get the warriors to the pass, Charlie commanded, his voice echoing like thunder. Jessica, go with Mrs. Gable to the inner sanctum. It's the most secure part of the fortress. Charlie, wait. I reached out, grabbing his forearm. His muscles were like granite beneath my touch. Don't kill them all. My sister? She's still there. She's the only one who was ever kind to me. Please. Charlie looked at my hand on his arm, then back at my face. He leaned down and pressed a hard, brief kiss to my forehead. It felt like a brand. I will try, he said. But if they try to take you from me, Jessica, there won't be enough of Iron Ridge left to bury. He strode out, his cape billowing behind him like the wings of a dark god. I stood in the silent war room, looking at the map. The red markers of the Iron Ridge were closing in. I was a healer, a bringer of life. But as I watched the man I had saved march toward a bloodbath, I realized that some lives can only be saved if others are destroyed. I followed Mrs. Gable down into the stone depths of the fortress, the sound of war horns beginning to wail in the distance. The defective Omega was no longer a ghost. I was the prize at the center of a slaughterhouse. The inner sanctum was a cold, silent vault carved directly into the mountain's marrow. While the stone walls were feet thick, they couldn't muffle the sound of the world tearing itself apart outside. Every few minutes, a low, rhythmic thud vibrated through the floor, the sound of Charlie's heavy artillery or the collapse of ice shelves under the weight of shifting bodies. I couldn't sit still. Mrs. Gable sat in the corner, her knitting needles clicking in a frantic, steady rhythm, but I paced the length of the chamber like a caged animal. You'll wear a hole in your slippers, child, Mrs. Gable said without looking up. They're dying out there because of me, I whispered, clutching my elbows. Silas won't stop. He's obsessed with purity. To him, an Omega leaving the pack isn't just a loss of labor, it's a stain on his record. He'd rather see me dead than under a different flag. Suddenly, the heavy iron door of the sanctum groaned. It didn't open. It shuddered under a massive blow. Mrs. Gable stood up, her needles dropping. The inner gates, they shouldn't have been able to get this far. A second blow followed, then the screech of twisting metal. The door burst inward, and a man stepped through the dust. He wasn't one of Charlie's warriors. He was lean, scarred, and wore the gray furs of the Iron Ridge. Silas. I breathed, my blood turning to ice. The beta of my old pack looked around the room with a sneer. His eyes landed on me, and a flicker of cruel satisfaction crossed his face. Behind him stood two other warriors, their muzzles stained with fresh blood. They had shifted back into human form, but the predator still danced in their eyes. "The little runaway," Silas said, stepping over the threshold. "Do you have any idea how many men I lost getting through that side tunnel? All for a barren girl who can't even grow fur." "Leave her alone," Mrs. Gable shouted, stepping in front of me. Silas didn't even look at her. He backhanded her with a casual, brutal force that sent her sprawling against the stone wall. She slumped down unconscious. "You're coming home, Jessica," Silas said, reaching for his belt. He pulled out a pair of silver-lined shackles. "The Alpha has decided your sentence. Public execution. We need to remind the other Omegas what happens when they think they're worth a king's protection." I backed away until my heels hit the altar at the back of the room. "Charlie will kill you. He's already won the pass. You're trapped." "Charlie is busy with my diversion," Silas laughed. "He's fighting shadows in the valley while I take the goat paths. By the time he realizes I'm inside his walls, you'll be halfway to the border, and this fortress will be a pyre." He lunged for me. I dodged, my healer's instincts kicking in. I was used to moving quickly around thrashing injured warriors. I grabbed a heavy silver candle holder from the altar and swung it. It caught him across the temple, drawing blood. Silas roared, his face contorting. His bones began to crack and shift, the sickening sound of a forced transformation. He wasn't going to take me back alive. He was going to maim me first. The wolf that emerged was a mangy, gray beast with yellowed teeth. He lunged, pinning me against the cold stone. His hot, foul breath was in my face, his claws sinking into my shoulders. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end, praying that Charlie wouldn't blame himself. Then the world exploded. The entire back wall of the sanctum, solid granite, burst inward. A shadow larger and darker than anything I had ever seen filled the room. It wasn't a man, and it wasn't a normal wolf. It was an elder form, the prehistoric, monstrous shape only the Alpha Kings could take. The black beast didn't growl. It made a sound like the earth splitting open. In one motion, the king's wolf seized Silas by the throat. The beta didn't even have time to whimper. With a single, sickening snap, the man who had tormented my entire childhood was gone. The other two warriors didn't even try to fight. They turned to run, but Charlie was a blur of black fur and rage. Within seconds, the room was silent again, save for the wet sound of blood dripping onto the floor. The massive wolf turned toward me. His amber eyes were glowing with a terrifying, unhinged power. He looked like a monster. He looked like the thing people warn children about. But as he stepped toward me, I didn't shrink away. I saw the way his flanks heaved with exhaustion. I saw the fresh silver burns on his chest from the battle. "Charlie," I whispered. The wolf froze. The murderous light in his eyes flickered, then softened. He lowered his head, nudging my hand with his blood-slicked muzzle. Slowly, the fur receded. The bones snapped back into place. Charlie stood before me, naked and covered in the blood of my enemies. He looked broken. He looked human. I reached out, my trembling fingers touching the deep gash on his chest. "You're hurt." "I thought I was too late," he rasped, his voice breaking. He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his chest. He was shaking. The King of the North was shaking in the arms of an Omega. "I felt your fear through the bond, Jessica. I nearly tore my own heart out trying to get to you." "The bond?" I asked, looking up at him. "Charlie, I'm an Omega. I'm not supposed to have a bond with anyone, especially not a king." Charlie cupped my face, his thumbs wiping away my tears. "You saved my life with your own spirit. You didn't just heal my body, Jessica. You stitched your soul to mine. You aren't just an Omega. You're my mate. And God help anyone who tries to tell me otherwise." Beyond the broken door, the sounds of battle were dying down. The Iron Ridge had lost their beta and their nerve. But as I looked at Charlie, I realized the war for my life was over, and the war for my heart was just beginning. The aftermath of the battle was not a celebration, it was a cleansing. Charlie's warriors moved through the fortress like shadows, clearing the remains of the Iron Ridge invaders. I stayed by Charlie's side, my hands stained with his blood as I worked to heal the gashes on his chest. For the first time, I wasn't healing because I was ordered to. I was healing because every wince he made felt like a needle in my own skin. "The council is calling for a hearing," Caleb said, stepping into the king's private solar. He looked exhausted, his armor dented and charred. "They've heard about Silas. They're calling it an unprovoked slaughter of a high-ranking official." Charlie didn't move as I pressed a warm cloth to his shoulder. "Silas broke the ancient law of sanctuary. He entered my home to kill a woman under my protection. If the council wants to call that unprovoked, let them come and say it to my face." "They won't come alone, Charlie," Caleb warned. "They're gathering at the neutral ground of the High Falls. They want you to bring Jessica. They want to examine her claim of the bond." I felt a cold shiver go through me. "Examine? How?" Charlie's jaw tightened. "They want to see if an Omega is truly capable of bonding with an Alpha King. In their eyes, if the bond is a lie, then I have no legal right to shield you from your pack's executioner." "But Silas is dead," I argued. "Who would even want me back now?" "Alpha Merrick," Charlie said, his voice dropping into a low growl. "Your father. He's the one who signed your death warrant to cover his own debts. He's doubled down. He's telling the council that I bewitched you, that I used dark magic to fake a mating bond." I sank onto the bench, my head in my hands. My own father. He didn't just want me gone. He wanted me erased so his shame would die with me. "I'll go," I whispered. Charlie turned, grabbing my wrists. "No. The High Falls are a trap. They'll try to separate us. They'll try to break you down until you admit you're defective just to make the pain stop." "I'm not the girl who lived in the Iron Ridge kitchens anymore, Charlie," I said, looking up at him. "I saved a king. I fought a beta. If I don't stand up now, I'll be a ghost for the rest of my life. I want them to see me. I want them to see what they threw away." Charlie searched my eyes for a long time. The ferocity in him was still there, but beneath it was a growing respect. He leaned down, pressing his lips to mine. It wasn't the desperate kiss of a sanctum, it was a promise. "Then we go together," he said. "But you will wear the colors of my house. You will walk in as a queen, or we won't walk in at all." The journey to the High Falls took 2 days through the treacherous mountain passes. I was dressed in heavy charcoal wool and silver fox fur, the crest of the Black Peak, a snarling wolf over a mountain, pinned to my breast. When we arrived at the Great Hall of the Falls, the air was thick with the scent of hundreds of shifters. The council consisted of 12 alphas from the surrounding territories, all of them sitting in a high semicircle of stone thrones. In the center of the floor stood my father, Merrick. He looked older, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were still the same cold, calculating marbles I remembered from my childhood. "You dare bring that creature here in the furs of a king?" Merrick spat as we entered. Charlie didn't even acknowledge him. He led me to the center of the room, his hand resting firmly on the small of my back. "I am here to answer the council's summons," Charlie announced, his voice echoing off the frozen waterfalls outside. "Not to listen to the braying of a man who sells his own blood to pay for his failures." The head of the council, a massive man named Alpha Thorn, leaned forward. "Charlie, the law is simple. An Omega cannot mate with an Alpha King. The power disparity would kill her during the marking. If she is not your mate, she is a fugitive of the Iron Ridge. Give her to her, Alpha, and this war ends." "The law is old," Charlie countered, "and the law is wrong." "Then prove it," Thorn challenged. "Mark her. Here. Before the council. If she survives the surge of your alpha power, we will acknowledge the bond. If she dies, then the law is upheld." The room went silent. The marking was an agonizing process even for a strong beta female. For an Omega who couldn't shift, for a girl who was considered barren and weak, the surge of an Alpha King's power would be like trying to channel a lightning bolt through a glass straw. It would likely shatter my heart. Charlie looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing fear. I won't do it. I won't risk her life, just to satisfy your curiosity. If you don't, Merrick shouted, you admit she is a slave. Guards, seize her. The council guards stepped forward, their spears leveled. Charlie shifted his weight, his muscles tensing, ready to tear the room apart to protect me. I stepped forward, moving out of the safety of Charlie's shadow. Do it, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. Jessica, no, Charlie hissed. I turned to him, taking his large, scarred hand in mine. You told me I stitched my soul to yours in the snow. If that's true, then your power won't break me. It will recognize me. Trust me, Charlie. For once in my life, let me be the one to choose my fate. Charlie's hand shook as he reached for my neck. The council watched like vultures. My father smiled, a sick, twisted look of triumph. He expected me to drop dead. He wanted me to. Charlie leaned in, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin of my throat where my scent gland lay. I love you, he whispered, so low only I could hear. Forgive me if this hurts. Then he bit. Pain like I had never known exploded through my nervous system. It wasn't just a physical sting, it was a tidal wave of golden fire. I felt Charlie's entire history, his battles, his loneliness, his rage, and his hope pour into my veins. I felt my heart stop. The world went white. I heard my father laugh. But then, deep in the core of my being, something answered. That spark of healing light I had used to save him in the snow flared up. It didn't fight his power, it embraced it. The golden fire turned into a warm, humming glow that radiated from my skin. I didn't fall. I didn't scream. I opened my eyes, and they were no longer brown. They were glowing with the same molten amber as the king's. The room fell into a deathly silence. The alphas on the council stood up, one by one, their faces filled with awe and terror. On my neck, the mark of the black peak wasn't a jagged scar. It was a glowing, silver sigil that pulsed in time with Charlie's heart. I looked at my father. The smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of pure horror. The defective Omega is gone, father, I said, my voice carrying a power that made the stone floor tremble. You're looking at your queen. Charlie wrapped his arm around me, his face filled with a fierce, blinding pride. He turned to the council, his eyes sweeping over them like a blade. The examination is over, he declared. Now, let's talk about the punishment for those who tried to kill my mate. The high falls became a tomb of silence. The alphas of the council, men who had spent decades enforcing the natural order, looked at me as if I were a ghost that had suddenly gained the power to haunt them. My father, Merrick, backed away, his boots scuffing against the stone. It's a trick, he hissed, though his voice lacked conviction. Some healer's potion, a temporary glow to fool the senses. An Omega cannot carry the weight of a king's mark. Charlie stepped forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. The mark is bone deep, Merrick. It is blood-bound. If you doubt the validity of my queen, perhaps you would like to test her strength yourself? Charlie didn't wait for an answer. He turned to the council. My mate was sold as a slave. She was hunted like an animal. She was sentenced to death by her own kin for the crime of showing mercy. Under the laws of the Great Divide, I claim the right of retribution. Alpha Thorn, the head of the council, looked at me with a newfound wariness. The right of retribution is ancient, Charlie. It allows the wronged party to set the terms of punishment. But be careful. If you push the other packs too far, you risk a permanent schism. I am not the one who pushed, I said, stepping up beside Charlie. My voice didn't shake. The golden warmth of the bond was a shield around my heart. For years, The Iron Ridge Pack has survived on the labor of those they call defective. You take our healing, you take our service, and when we are no longer useful, you discard us. I am not just here for myself. I am here for every Omega who is left to freeze in the snow. I looked directly at my father. Alpha Merrick, you owe the Black Peak a blood debt for the attempted assassination of its king and the kidnapping of its queen. But I am a healer, not a butcher. I will not ask for your head. Marek's eyes flickered with a desperate hope. You see? She is still weak. She doesn't have the stomach for leadership. I'm not finished, I said coldly. The Iron Ridge Pack will be dissolved. Your lands will be divided among the border villages you burned. Your warriors will be given the choice to swear fealty to the Black Peak or face exile. And you, father. I paused, the weight of 1,000 childhood bruises surfacing in my mind. You will be stripped of your rank. You will be sent to the northern mines, not as a leader, but as a laborer. You will live the life I lived. You will eat the scraps you gave me. You will sleep in the cold you forced me to endure. And you will pray that the healers you once mocked find it in their hearts to stitch your wounds. A gasp went through the hall. For a shifter, losing rank and being forced into manual labor was a fate worse than death. It was the ultimate humiliation. You can't do this, Merrick screamed, lunging forward. Before he could take 2 steps, Caleb and 2 other Black Peak enforcers intercepted him, forcing him to his knees. Charlie stood over him, his presence towering. She's your queen, Charlie growled. Her word is law. If the council disagrees, stand now and declare yourselves enemies of the North. No one stood. One by one, the alphas bowed their heads. They weren't just afraid of Charlie anymore. They were afraid of the girl who had survived the impossible. As the guards dragged my father away, he looked back at me. For the first time, I didn't feel fear when I looked at him. I didn't feel hatred. I felt nothing. He was just a man, small and broken, receding into the shadows of the hall. The tension in the room began to bleed away, replaced by a frantic whispering. Charlie reached out, taking my hand. His palm was warm, and I could feel his heartbeat through the mark on my neck, a steady, rhythmic drumming that told me I was safe. We leave at dawn, Charlie announced to the council. The North has a queen, and the North remembers who stood by her. We walked out of the hall and into the crisp night air. The waterfalls were frozen mid-plunge, glowing like diamonds under the moonlight. You were incredible, Charlie whispered as we reached our carriage. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in the crook of my neck, right over the pulsing silver mark. I thought I lost you when I bit. For a second, your heart stopped. I felt the world go dark. I felt it too, I said, leaning into his strength. But your light was stronger than the dark, Charlie. You didn't just mark me. You gave me a reason to stay. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it, he promised. But as we began the journey back to the fortress, a shadow crossed Charlie's face. He looked out at the dark tree-line, his nostrils flaring. What is it? I asked. The Iron Ridge is gone, he said softly. But my sister, she hasn't been heard from in years. She was the one who fled the North because she couldn't handle the beast inside our bloodline. If she hears that an Omega has tamed the king, she might come looking for what she thinks is hers. The victory felt complete, but in the world of shifters, peace was a fragile thing. I leaned my head on Charlie's shoulder, watching the snow fall against the glass. I had survived the blizzard and the bite. Whatever was coming next, I wouldn't face it as a ghost. I was Jessica, the healer queen, and my story was only just beginning. The return to the Black Peak Fortress was unlike any journey I had ever taken. Word had traveled faster than our horses. At every mountain pass and small village, shifters gathered by the roadside. They didn't stand in fearful silence as they usually did for the Alpha King. They cheered. They threw winter-blooming jasmine onto the path. They looked at the carriage with eyes full of hope. I was no longer the defective healer. I was a miracle. When we finally passed through the great iron gates of the fortress, the entire household was lined up in the courtyard. Mrs. Gable was there, her head bandaged but a wide, tearful smile on her face. Caleb stood at the front, his fist over his heart in a salute that was mirrored by every warrior present. Charlie stepped out first, then reached back to take my hand. He didn't just help me down, he lifted me, keeping me close to his side as we climbed the stairs to the throne room. "It's different now," I whispered to him as we walked through the hall. "The air feels lighter." "Because you brought the spring with you, Jessica," Charlie replied, his voice thick with emotion. That evening, a great feast was held. The tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, spiced breads, and mountain wine. But for the first time, I wasn't the one serving. I sat in a chair of carved obsidian and velvet, right beside the king. Halfway through the night, Charlie stood and raised his silver chalice. The room fell silent. "For years, this fortress has been a place of war," Charlie said, his gaze sweeping over his people. "We survived by being harder than the ice and sharper than the wind. But we forgot that a pack is not just an army. It is a family. My queen has reminded me that the greatest strength isn't the power to kill, but the courage to save." He turned to me, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath hitch. "To Jessica, the heart of the North." To the queen the hall roared, the sound shaking the very foundations of the mountain. Later, when the fires had burned low and the music had faded to a soft hum, Charlie and I escaped to the high balcony overlooking the valley. The sky was a deep, velvet purple, dusted with more stars than I had ever seen. I leaned against the stone railing, feeling the cool air on my skin. The mark on my neck hummed with a gentle, contented warmth. "What are you thinking about?" Charlie asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I was thinking about the girl in the snow," I said softly. "The one who thought her life was over. I wish I could tell her that it was actually just beginning, that the defect she hated was the very thing that would lead her to her soulmate." Charlie kissed the top of my head. "You saved me in more ways than one, Jessica. You didn't just stop my heart from quitting, you gave it a reason to beat." I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had gone from a terrifying beast to my entire world. "We have a lot of work to do, don't we? The other packs, they'll be watching us." "Let them watch," Charlie said, a playful but protective glint in his amber eyes. "Let them see what happens when a king loves his queen. We're going to change things, Jessica. No more omegas in the shadows. No more ghosts." I smiled, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of promise and a future I finally believed in. The blizzard had passed. The wounds had healed. And in the heart of the frozen mountains, the fire of our bond would never go out. 1 year later, the Blackwood Pass was no longer a place of death. A small, sturdy healing center now stood near the clearing where I had once found a dying black wolf. It was staffed by omegas and betas from across the territories, learning the arts that were once kept secret. Inside the fortress, the sound of laughter was more common than the clashing of swords. I sat in the library, looking over the new trade agreements that treated every member of the pack as a citizen of worth. The door opened, and Charlie walked in, carrying a small bundle wrapped in white fur. Our son, Leo, was born 2 months ago. Unlike me, he had already shown signs of a powerful shift, but he had my eyes, the eyes of a healer. "He wouldn't sleep," Charlie said, looking slightly overwhelmed as the tiny infant pulled at his dark hair. "I think he wants his mother to tell him a story." I took the baby into my arms, the golden bond humming with a new, beautiful melody. "A story?" I laughed, looking at my husband and my child. "I think I have a very good one. It starts with a girl, a blizzard, and a wolf who didn't know he was waiting to be saved." Charlie sat at my feet, resting his head on my knee as I began to speak. The North was no longer just a territory, it was a home. And as for the girl who used her last breath to save a stranger, she had found that when you give everything to love, the universe has a way of giving it all back with interest. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Jessica and Charlie. I'd love to hear from you. Which part of the story did you find the most intriguing? Was it Jessica's brave sacrifice in the frozen clearing, or the moment she stood her ground against her father in the high falls? What do you think would have happened if Charlie's sister had shown up to challenge the new queen? Please comment your thoughts below and let me know. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription is a huge support and truly means the world to me as my channel is still young and trying to grow. Thank you for being part of this story. I'll see you in the next one.